The wind off the sound knifed through the trees and across the hill where the cemetery sat. The late afternoon light had turned thin and colorless, the sky a flat sheet of gray. Granite markers rose in quiet rows, some polished, some stained by rain and time. Jack Rivera knelt in front of the simple headstone near the crest of the hill. His jeans were damp at the knees where the cold seeped up from the ground. In his hands he held a plastic-wrapped bouquet of grocery store chrysanthemums, the kind that went on clearance when the petals started to wilt. His knuckles were raw and cracked from work. There were faint streaks of white paint along his fingers that soap had not managed to scrub away. He stared at the name carved into the stone. Daniel Whitmore, 1981, 24. The last name still looked out of place to him. It sounded like it belonged on office towers and glass walls, not on a slab of granite surrounded by wet leaves. Jack set the bouquet down, tucking the flimsy stems against the base so the wind would not grab them. For a moment, he just rested his fingers on the cold stone, trying to steady his breathing. The air burned his lungs. It smelled faintly of damp earth and cut grass. He swallowed hard. The words stuck anyway. "Hey, Daniel," he said, barely more than a whisper. I made it, sort of." His voice wavered. He let out a breath and shut his eyes. Images pressed in on him. A parked truck with fogged-up windows. A little girl curled in the back seat under two thin blankets. A stranger offering a piece of candy on a freezing night. His throat tightened. He did not cry loudly. It was quieter than that. Shoulders hunched, jaw locked, eyes squeezed shut, as if maybe that would keep the tears from escaping. They slipped out anyway, warm trails in the bitter wind. One dropped onto the stone and disappeared almost immediately. The sound of footsteps on the gravel path came soft at first, then clearer. He felt the presence behind him before he heard the voice. "That is my husband's grave," a woman said. Her tone was calm, not raised but edged with something sharp. "Who are you?" Jack froze. His hand slipped from the stone. The question hung in the air between them. He pushed himself up slowly, his knees popping in protest. When he turned, he saw her standing a few feet away, the wind tugging at the edges of her charcoal coat. She was in her mid-30s, blonde hair pulled back in a knot at the nape of her neck, a few strands loose and damp against her cheeks. The coat looked expensive, the kind that never saw a clearance rack. Her boots were clean black leather that had never once stepped in construction dust. Her face did not match the rest. There were shadows under her eyes, the kind too deep for makeup to hide, a tightness around her mouth like she had been clenching her teeth for months. Jack scrubbed at his face with the back of his hand, embarrassed by the tears. He dropped his gaze to the ground, to his scuffed work boots and the outline of dried mud around them. "I am sorry," he said. His voice came out rougher than he liked. "I did not mean to bother anyone." "You are not bothering anyone," the woman replied. "You are standing at my husband's grave and crying. That is different." There was no heat in it, just a factual statement and a question wrapped together. Her eyes searched his face, as if trying to place him in some forgotten memory. He looked back only long enough to see that those eyes were more tired than angry. He cleared his throat. "I can go." "You did not answer me." Her shoulders dropped a fraction, some of the sharpness easing, but her gaze stayed steady. "Who are you?" Jack glanced past her down the hill toward the entrance where the rusted iron gate framed a narrow strip of road and distant headlights. It would be easy to walk away, easier than explaining. He looked back at the stone beside him. The letters were clean and deep. Someone had left fresh lilies on the other side, their white petals bright against the gray. "My name is Jack," he said at last. "Jack Rivera." The name hung there meaningless to her. "And," she said, "why are you here, Jack Rivera?" He hesitated. He had gone over this conversation in his head on the drive up in the dark mornings before work, lying awake listening to the radiator click and groan. In his head, it never started with him being caught crying like a kid. The cold slipped under his jacket between his shoulder blades. He felt suddenly very aware of the frayed cuffs, the faded flannel shirt, the way his gloves stuck from his back pocket like a flag that read blue collar. He nodded toward the grave, his voice lowered. "Your husband saved my life," he said. The woman's expression did not change, but something in her eyes did. The focus sharpened. The wind shifted, pushing a strand of hair across her forehead. She did not brush it away. "Saved your life," she repeated. "How?" Jack let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. His fingers twitched once at his sides as if reaching for something that was not there. "Couple years back," he said. "It was winter. I was living in my truck with my little girl. Things were bad." He fell quiet, feeling himself slide toward details he was not ready to spill out onto cold ground in front of a stranger. The woman waited. Gravel crunched softly as she adjusted her weight, but she did not step closer. At last she spoke. "I am Claire," she said. "Claire Whitmore." The last name landed like a small echo against the stone at his side. It was the name carved there, the one attached to an entire tower downtown, the one on the side of delivery vans and billboards. It hit him that he was talking to someone whose world he would normally only see from a distance through a windshield or on a screen. She looked past him at the headstone, then back. "I knew most of the people Daniel helped publicly," she said. "Charity galas, scholarships, the things that made the papers." Her voice thinned slightly around the last sentence. "He did not tell me everyone he helped quietly." Her gaze dropped briefly to his hands, to the cracks in his skin, then lifted again. "So," Claire said, "tell me how my husband saved your life." Jack watched his breath fog between them. The sky had darkened another shade. Somewhere lower on the hill, a crow called, once harsh and flat. He could have lied. He could have brushed it off, as a figure of speech walked away, kept the story his alone. Instead, he found himself nodding. "It was outside a diner off Highway 5, he said. "Middle of the night. It was raining." The memory rose up, as sharp as the wind around them, carrying with it the smell of old coffee, churras, and cold French fries. The sound of a man sitting down on a concrete step, as if he had all the time in the world. Walled. Jack glanced at Claire again. Her shoulders had softened. Her hands were bare and the cold fingers curled loosely around the strap of her purse. For the first time, he saw not the coat or the boots, but the way she was standing, like someone already tired of holding herself upright, but doing it anyway. She lifted her chin toward the path. "Walk with me," she said quietly. "It is too cold to stand still." Jack hesitated, then stepped away from the grave. As they started along the gravel path side by side with a careful distance between them, he glanced back once. The simple headstone stood against the darkening sky, his cheap bouquet leaning up against it, a small burst of color at the base of a name he would not forget. He turned his eyes forward again and began to speak. Gravel shifted under their shoes as they followed the path downhill. The air smelled of wet bark and distant salt from the bay. For a few steps, neither of them spoke. Jack tucked his hands into his pockets, as if that might make it easier to reach back into a night he hated remembering. "It was 3 winters ago," he said. "January, the kind of cold that hurts your teeth." Claire gave a small nod, eyes forward now, letting him talk without staring him down. "There is a diner off the interstate," Jack went on. "Glow of neon, always open. Coffee tastes like cardboard, but they keep refilling it. I was parked in the back lot." The memory took over. The cemetery blurred. The night at the diner came back in sharp edges and cold air. The truck had been an old Ford with one working headlight and rust along the wheel wells. The windshield was filmed with condensation from Lily's breath. She was 4, then bundled in 2 hoodies that were 2 big curls splayed out on the back seat, lips parted in sleep. Jack had sat on the concrete step outside the diner's back door because the inside was for paying customers. He had bought 1 small coffee and stretched it as long as possible, then taken the rest to go. His fingers had been so cold he could barely feel the paper cup. His stomach hurt not just from hunger, but from the knot of fear that had taken up permanent residence there. He had counted his money 3 times under the yellow security light. Crumpled bills, quarters, a lone dime. Not enough for a room. Barely enough for gas and a few cheap meals if he made it last. Inside the truck, Lily had shifted in her sleep and coughed once, a thin sound that cut right through the night. Jack had looked at the dark parking lot, the empty stretch of highway beyond, and felt the world narrow down. No plan, no map, just cold. The diner's side door had opened behind him, with a burst of brighter light and the sizzle of a grill. Laughter floated out for a second before the door swung shut again. He did not look up right away. People came and went. None of them stayed. The footsteps this time were slower, not the quick clatter of a server on a smoke break. More measured. A man stepped out and paused, the glow from inside framing his shoulders for a moment before the door creaked closed. "Cold night," the man said. Jack had muttered something that might have been a yes. He kept his eyes on the dark outline of his truck, on the small face in the back seat. The man did not leave. The concrete dipped as someone sat down beside him. "I am Daniel," he said. "You want the rest of this burger? I ordered too much." Jack glanced over then. The guy looked like he belonged at a downtown bar, not behind a diner in a nowhere lot. Early 40s hair, a little must tie loosened the collar of his dress shirt open. His coat was unbuttoned, but he did not seem to mind the cold. In his hand was a takeout box. He set it between them on the step without pushing it at Jack. "I am good," Jack said, though his stomach clenched at the smell of grilled meat and onions. Pride came out faster than honesty. "Thanks." The man did not move the box away. He simply reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, crinkling package. A piece of butterscotch candy wrapped in gold foil. "My dad carried these all the time," he said. "He used to say, 'You cannot fix everything with a piece of candy, but you can make someone feel seen for 5 seconds. He held it out. The candy rested in his palm, reflecting the dull security light. Jack stared at it. It was such a small, stupid thing, this little drop of sugar, in a world of bigger problems. Maybe that was why his fingers felt heavy when he reached over and took it. "Thanks," he said. The man smiled just a little. Not the bright grin of someone closing a deal, but something quieter. "You got someone in the truck?" he asked. "Just my kid," Jack answered before he could stop himself. "She is sleeping." The man's eyes shifted to the fogged windows, then back. He did not ask the obvious question. He did not say why. He did not ask what Jack had done wrong to end up here. Instead, he asked, "Is she warm enough?" Jack's jaw tightened. "She will be." They sat like that for a minute. The parking lot buzzed with the hum of a light that should have been replaced years ago. Far off, a semi rolled by tires hissing on wet pavement. The man spoke first. "I have seen a lot of guys with that look," he said. "The one where you are counting numbers that do not add up." Jack let out a short, humorless breath. "You have no idea." "Maybe not the exact math," the man said, "but I know the feeling." Jack picked at the edge of the candy wrapper. He did not open it. He did not eat it. He just needed something to do with his hands. "Business went under," he said after a moment, surprising himself with the admission. "Crew tools, everything. Then the house went. Then my wife decided she had had enough of surprises. Took her name off and walked. So now it is just me and Lily and a truck that is one good breakdown away from being a lawn ornament." The man listened without interrupting, head slightly tilted, as if the story deserved full attention. "Any family around?" he asked. "Not the kind that picks up the phone," Jack said. Silence settled again. The man tore a corner off a napkin, folded it, unfolded it. "Do you have a plan?" he asked. Jack let out a breath that fogged in front of him and disappeared. "Make it to the next day. Find work. Try not to screw up more than I already have." The man nodded like that was a reasonable answer, and not a threadbare thing barely holding together. He stood then, brushing off his hands. Jack braced for a pat on the shoulder, some empty phrase about things getting better, and then the sound of footsteps walking away. Instead, the man reached into his coat, took out an envelope, and held it out. "Do me a favor," he said. "Do not open this until I am back in my car." Jack frowned. "What is it?" "Just say yes," the man replied. There was no push in his voice, just a calm certainty. "I am not here to make you feel small. I am just here." Jack looked at the envelope. Plain white, no writing on it. He thought of all the times someone had offered help, and then added a weight of expectation on top of it. "I cannot pay you back," he said. The man shook his head. "I am not asking you to. When you are standing on your own 2 feet, again, find someone whose world is falling apart, and be the person who sits down instead of walking by. That is how you pay me back." He hesitated, then added, "Kindness does not need a reason, it just needs a moment." Jack felt something in his chest shift at those words. He closed his fingers around the envelope, the paper stiff under his calloused palm. The man stepped back. "Get her somewhere warm," he said, nodding toward the truck. "Kids should not know the shape of a steering wheel from the back seat." He turned and walked toward the front of the diner. The neon sign painted his coat red for a second before he moved past it. Then he crossed the lot toward a dark sedan that Jack had not even noticed before. By the time Jack stood and turned fully, the man was already pulling out onto the road. The taillights merged with the flow of traffic and were gone. Jack looked at the envelope under the buzzing security light. His fingers shook as he tore it open. Inside, there had been a folded sheet with an address and a phone number for an apartment complex, a copy of a signed lease for 1 month, paid in full, a note that said, "Deposit covered," and a stack of bills thick enough to make his vision blur. The burger in the box beside him had gone cold by the time he could breathe again. He had run back inside the bell over the diner door, jangling, heart pounding, as he scanned the booths and bar stools. The server behind the counter had raised an eyebrow when he asked, "The guy who just left, where did he go?" "You mean Whitmore," the server had said. "He is already gone, honey. You just missed him." Whitmore. The name had meant nothing to Jack, then not really. It had been a sound attached to a person who had sat down in the cold and refused to treat him like a problem. On the path in the cemetery, Jack finished the story quietly. "When I saw the obituary 2 weeks ago," he said, "there was a picture, same face, same eyes. I had not even known his full name until then. Claire had stopped walking somewhere in the middle of his words. Now she stood still, one hand wrapped around her other wrist, as if she needed the anchor. "He never told me about you," she said. Her voice was steady, but there was something raw under it. Her gaze drifted to the side to a row of older graves marked with moss. "He used to leave the house with envelopes in his coat," she went on almost to herself. "I thought it was business, contracts, the boring stuff. I never opened his pockets to check." She looked back at Jack. "He said once that real generosity is quiet," she said. "That if you do it to be seen, it is not kindness, it is performance." Jack had no idea what to do with his hands. He settled for nodding. "I tried to find him," he said. "Every time I drove past that diner, I checked the lot. I thought maybe one day I could show him that Lily had a real bed, that I was working again, that his moment of kindness did not fall into a hole." Claire watched him for a long beat. "Is your daughter all right now?" she asked. "Lily. She is 7, Jack said. Pride softened his features for the first time. "Smart, draws on everything, talks too much when she is nervous." Claire's mouth tilted, not quite a smile, but close. He shifted his weight. "I should not have come out here crying at his grave like that. I just needed to say thank you somewhere." Claire reached into her coat and pulled out a small, cream-colored card. She held it between 2 fingers. "You came to the right place for that," she said. "But it does not have to be the only place." She offered him the card. "This is my number," she said, "and the office line for Whitmore Hope Fund. My brother-in-law, Nate, handles most of it, but it is in Daniel's name. If you ever want to give back the way he asked you to call, or if you ever find yourself counting numbers that do not add up again." Jack looked at the card. His thumb brushed over the embossed letters. Claire Whitmore, a cell number, the name of the foundation. "I did not tell you this to get anything," he said. "I know," Claire replied. Neither did he. The wind picked up, fluttering the edge of her coat. Jack hesitated, then took the card and slipped it carefully into his wallet, behind a worn photograph of Lily with ice cream on her face. Claire glanced back toward the grave. The chrysanthemums he had brought shivered in the gust. "Daniel would have liked that you came," she said quietly. Jack could not trust his voice, so he only nodded. They walked back toward the gate together, their footsteps leaving a faint trail in the damp gravel. When they reached the parking lot, Jack touched the brim of his cap in a small, awkward gesture of goodbye, then climbed into his aging pickup. As he pulled away, the cemetery in his rearview mirror shrank to a patch of gray and green. The card in his wallet felt heavier than it should for a piece of paper. He told himself he would never use it. He turned onto the main road and headed toward the small apartment where Lily would be waiting, with crayons spread across the kitchen table. By the time Jack turned off the main road and into his neighborhood, the sky had deepened to that particular Seattle blue that was almost gray. Streetlights blinked awake one by one, casting pale circles on cracked sidewalks. His truck rattled as it rolled over a familiar pothole near the corner. The apartment building sat halfway down the block, a tired 3-story structure with peeling beige paint and metal railings that had lost most of their shine. A string of plastic Christmas lights still hung along one balcony, even though the holidays were long past, half the bulbs burned out. Jack killed the engine and sat for a second, listening to it tick as it cooled. The silence after the noise of the road lay strangely heavy. He grabbed his lunch pail and stepped out into the damp evening. Up on the second floor, the curtains of his unit were wide open. Paper shapes were taped to the glass. Stars, a crooked moon, what might have been a cat. Behind the window, a small figure hopped off a chair. The front door opened before he even reached it. Lily stood there, hair sticking out in wild waves, wearing socks that did not match, and a t-shirt smeared with purple marker. "Dad," she said, already grinning, "you are late." He checked his watch out of habit. 5 minutes, he said. "Traffic." "You promised you would bring home the funny bread," she said, hands on her hips. Jack lifted the paper bag in his hand. "Sourdough as requested." Her grin broke wider. She grabbed the bag and darted back inside. He followed, kicking the door shut behind him. The apartment was small. 1 bedroom divided by a curtain so Lily could have the princess side, and Jack could have a corner with his mattress and a milk crate for a nightstand. The living room was taken up mostly by a sagging couch and a thrift store coffee table that still smelled faintly of someone else's cologne when the heat kicked on. The kitchen was technically a separate room, though 3 steps took you from one side to the other. On the fridge, crayon drawings overlapped the notice about fire exits and a magnet from a pizza place that never answered the phone. Lily scrambled up onto one of the mismatched chairs at the table, the paper bag in front of her. A scatter of colored pencils, an open math worksheet, and a glass with a ring of orange juice at the bottom claimed the rest of the space. Jack dropped his lunch pail on the counter and opened the fridge. A gallon of milk with a date a few days away. Half a carton of eggs. Leftover pasta in a plastic container. He grabbed the milk and closed the door with his foot. "How was school?" he asked, pouring a little into the glass. Lily ripped off a piece of bread and stuffed it into her mouth. "We had a spelling test," she said around the crumb. "I got all of them right, except because." "That one is tricky," he said. "It tricks grown-ups, too. Mrs. Chan said I can bring a picture to put on the class wall," Lily continued, "like of my family." Jack paused with the milk still in his hand. "Your family, huh?" "Yeah," she said. "I have to pick one or draw one. She said it can be from before or now." He took a slow breath, then set the milk down. "We can figure that out this weekend," he said. She nodded, already distracted by the bread humming a tune under her breath. He watched her for a moment, something easing in his chest. For all the rough edges of their life, there were these pieces that felt almost normal. Homework on the table, bread that was not stale, a kid complaining about spelling. Later that night, after Lily had brushed her teeth and argued about bedtime, for a full 5 minutes and then fallen asleep mid-sentence, Jack stood in the doorway of the bedroom and listened to her breathing. Her drawings were taped all over the curtain that split the room. Some were of animals, some of houses with slanted roofs and too many windows. One near the top was of a truck under a large yellow sun. 2 stick figures stood in front of it, one big one, small, holding hands. He turned off the lamp and backed out quietly. On the couch he sat with a stack of envelopes and a calculator. The coffee table was covered in bills. Rent, electric, phone, the final notice from the hospital for the stitches Lily had needed when she had tripped at the playground last year. He wrote numbers in a notebook, then crossed them out and wrote different numbers. The pen squeaked on the paper. When he had first moved into the apartment, the place had felt like a palace, a real address. Heat that came from radiators instead of curling up in the front seat of a truck. A lock that turned on a front door. He had hung the lease on the wall for a week like a certificate. The glow of that feeling had faded some, replaced by the daily grind of keeping it. But there was still a stubborn thread of gratitude running through the frustration. It kept him going on the mornings he had to be at the warehouse before dawn. The job at the warehouse was not glamorous, but it was steady. Pallets of goods came in on trucks went out again, and in the middle, men like Jack moved them from one place to another. He liked the routine. He liked the ache in his muscles at the end of the day. It felt honest. He set the bills aside, rubbed his eyes, and finally stretched out on the couch, too tired to change into anything else. The hum of the refrigerator became background noise. Somewhere a neighbor's TV leaked the sound of a talk show he could not quite make out. Rain began to patter against the window. He listened until sleep took him. The next morning started the same as most. Alarm at 5, coffee as dark as he could get, a toast that popped up slightly darker than it should. Lily sat at the table, hair sticking up, drawing while she ate a bowl of cereal. "Remember your gym shoes?" he said, rinsing his mug. "They are already in my backpack," she answered. "You asked me 3 times. "Good," he said. He snagged his lunch pail, kissed the top of her head, and pulled on his jacket. "Mrs. Flores will pick you up at 7:30. Lily made a face. "Her car smells like old French fries." "Better than walking in the rain," he said, opening the door. "Be good." "I am always good," she replied, then added, "mostly." At the warehouse, the day unfolded in the usual rhythm. The building was a cavern of concrete and steel, lit by rows of fluorescent strips that buzzed faintly. Forklifts beeped as they reversed. Radios crackled. Men shouted short, sharp instructions to be heard over the noise. Jack clocked in, grabbed his gloves, and started on his assigned section. He moved boxes, scanned barcodes, stacked crates. His mind drifted to bills, to Lily's spelling test, to the way she had said before or now about the family picture. By mid-afternoon, his shoulders ached. Sweat cooled on his back whenever he stopped moving. He was halfway through rearranging a pallet when he noticed the supervisor standing nearby, arms crossed. The man's hard hat sat slightly askew, his vest brighter than everyone else's. "Rivera," the supervisor said. "When you get a second, the office needs you." Jack felt his stomach tighten. "I can finish this row in 2 minutes," he said. "Do not bother," the supervisor replied. "Just go now." In the small office off the floor, the air smelled of burned coffee and toner. A computer monitor cast a blue glow over everything. On the desk lay a stack of printed notices. The warehouse manager, a man with thinning hair and a tired tie, gestured for Jack to sit. Jack stayed standing. "What is going on?" Jack asked. The manager sighed. His eyes flicked to the papers, then back. Corporate sent word down this morning, he said. Cutbacks. Automation. We are overstaffed. Jack did not need the speech. He had heard variations of it before in other rooms with other bosses. How many? He asked. A lot, the manager said. You are a good worker, Jack. This is not about performance. He slid a paper across the desk. The bold print at the top read, Notice of Termination. Jack stared at his name typed neatly below it. We can keep you on for 2 more weeks, the manager said. After that, there is nothing I can do. Jack's fingers curled against his palms. I have a kid, he said before he could stop himself. I know, the manager said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. I am sorry. Sorry did not pay rent. Jack took the paper, folded it in half, and tucked it into his jacket pocket. Do I finish my shift? He asked. The manager glanced past him at the floor. You can clock out now, he said. Go home. The word home caught in Jack's chest as he walked out. The warehouse noise washed over him, suddenly distant. He turned in his badge at the side door, the plastic scraping over the metal hook. Outside, the air was colder than it had been in the morning. His breath came out in short puffs as he crossed the lot to his truck. He sat with his hands on the wheel for a long moment before starting the engine. On the drive back, everything looked slightly off. The familiar route, the same billboards, the same cluster of shops at the corner, where he sometimes bought Lily a treat on Fridays. All of it underscored by the fact that he was going home earlier than usual without meaning to. In the apartment lobby, a sour smell lingered, something like old mop water and cigarettes. The overhead light flickered. On the bulletin board, a new sheet of paper was pinned crookedly among the flyers for guitar lessons and room rentals. Notice to tenants, it read. Jack stepped closer. Effective next month, monthly rent would increase by $200. Additional increases might follow. Any concerns could be directed to the management office, which was open for precisely 2 hours on Thursdays. $200. He read it twice as if the number might shrink if he stared hard enough. On the second floor, his downstairs neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, was having another loud phone conversation. Jack climbed past the noise, past the window, with the dead plant, past the chipped handrail, and reached his door. Inside the apartment was quiet. Mrs. Flores had not dropped Lily off yet. The space felt both cramped and oddly vast. He set his lunch pail on the counter and unfolded the termination notice on the table. The word effective glared up at him. He laid the rent notice beside it, 2 sheets of paper side by side, both taking things away. When Lily burst in 20 minutes later with wet sneakers and a story about a boy who had brought a frog to school in his backpack, Jack smiled and listened and asked the right questions. He made grilled cheese sandwiches and cut them in triangles the way she liked. He did not mention the paper on the table, not yet. That night, as rain battered the window harder than before, the radiator rattled and clanked, and then went quiet. Jack stood in front of it, hand hovering over the metal. No warmth came. He checked the thermostat, turned the dial up. Nothing. In the bedroom, Lily curled deeper under her blanket, hugging her stuffed fox. She was already asleep, breath puffing out in small clouds in the colder air. Jack tugged another blanket from his side of the room, laid it over her, and tucked it around her shoulders. His own fingers had started to go numb. He went back to the kitchen table, sat down, and stared at the 2 pieces of paper again. His jaw clenched. The apartment that had once felt like a safe harbor now felt like a room that was slowly shrinking. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere far off, then faded. The radiator stayed silent. The cold crept in. The cold did not leave. It settled into the apartment over the next few days, a steady creeping presence. Morning started with the same pale light leaking around the blinds, but the air had a bite to it now. Jack could see his breath when he exhaled in the kitchen. He called the landlord twice. The first time the man said, "We are working on the boiler. You are not the only one without heat." The second time when Jack mentioned that there was a kid in the apartment, the answer was, "Use extra blankets. It is Seattle, not Alaska." Jack hung up before he said something that would make things worse. He kept looking for work. After dropping Lily at school, he walked from strip mall to strip mall, into diners, hardware stores, small warehouses. He filled out applications with pens on chains, spoke to managers who wore practiced sympathy. "We just cut staff," one said. "We will keep your resume on file," another offered. He checked the car repair place, the grocery store, even the coffee shop on the corner where high school kids worked part-time. The answer was always no. Afternoons, he was back at the apartment before Lily. The quiet sounded different now. It had an edge to it. He made lists, scratched them out, made new ones. On the 3rd morning after the heat went out, Lily stood in the hallway, with her backpack cheeks flushed, hair pulled into a lopsided ponytail. "Dad," she said, shifting from foot to foot, My head feels weird. He touched her forehead. It was warm, too warm. Maybe you are coming down with something, he said. There is a lot going around at school. I can still go, she insisted. We have art today. I do not want to miss it. She looked up at him with those wide eyes, hopeful and stubborn. He hesitated. The rent notice and termination papers sat in a small stack on the counter, a silent jury. Missing work had already cost him hours, and he did not have a job to miss anymore. Missing school would put Lily behind. Try today, he said finally. If you feel worse, tell Mrs. Chan. She will call me. She nodded, zipped her coat up to her chin, and went out the door. Mrs. Flores waited at the bottom of the stairs, a knit hat pulled low over her ears, car idling at the curb. Jack watched from the window as Lily climbed into the back seat. She waved before the car pulled away. By noon, his phone rang. The number on the screen was the school. He answered with a knot already tightening in his chest. Mr. Rivera, the school nurse said. Her voice was brisk but not unkind. Lily has a fever. She says she has a headache and feels dizzy. I think you should come pick her up. He borrowed an old sedan from Mr. Jenkins downstairs, who handed over the keys with a grunt and a, "Do not put a scratch on her." The heater in the sedan wheezed but at least coughed up warm air. At the health office, Lily sat on a plastic cot with a faded cartoon pillowcase. Her cheeks were bright red. Her eyes looked glassy. "Hey, Bug," Jack said softly. She gave him a small smile. "Hi," she whispered. The nurse handed Jack a sheet of paper with notes and a recommendation. "Her temp is high," she said. "She is breathing a little fast. I would get her to a clinic today. If it gets worse, the emergency room." The word emergency sounded too big in the small room. Jack nodded, trying to keep his face neutral. "Thank you," he said. He buckled Lily carefully into the front seat of the sedan, her small body bundled in her coat. She leaned her head against the window, eyes half closed. The clinic was in a squat building near the freeway with a pharmacy attached, and a waiting room filled with the coughs and sniffles of half the city. The smell of antiseptic and old magazines hung in the air. At the desk, a woman with tired eyes handed him a clipboard. "Insurance?" she asked. "No," Jack said. The word tasted dry. "Self-pay," she replied, checking a box. "There is a minimum fee due today." He did not ask how much. He signed where she pointed and took a seat with Lily. They waited. Children cried. A television in the corner played a cooking show with the sound off. Lily's head grew heavier against his shoulder. Her skin felt hot under his hand. When they finally saw a doctor, it was in a small exam room with posters of lungs on the wall. The doctor listened to Lily's chest with a stethoscope, frowned, and sent them for a chest x-ray down the hall. Lily stood against a cold plate while a technician instructed her to hold still. Jack watched through the glass window, helpless, every muscle in his jaw clenched. Back in the room, the doctor tapped on a tablet, then looked at Jack. "She has pneumonia," he said. "It is good you brought her in. We will start antibiotics. She needs rest and fluids. Watch her breathing. If it gets any more labored, you go to the hospital." "Pneumonia?" The word settled over him like another blanket of weight. At the front desk, after the prescription was sent to the pharmacy, they handed him an itemized bill. He stared at the number at the bottom, $312. "We can take payment at the window," the clerk said, as if it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Jack opened his wallet. There was not much inside. He pulled out his debit card, knowing exactly what the balance would show, and handed it over. The card machine process thought about it, then approved. By the time they left, he had a white bag with a bottle of antibiotics and a folded sheet of aftercare instructions. His checking account would be almost empty. In the sedan, Lily held the bottle in her lap, like it was something delicate. "Is it bad?" she asked. Her voice was thin, the usual lightness gone. "You are going to be okay," he said. "You just have to let the medicine do its thing." He tried to put all the certainty he did not feel into those words. Back at the apartment, the cold seemed worse. It met them at the door, wrapped around their ankles. The radiator was still silent. Jack had draped towels over the windows, trying to block drafts, but the place still felt like a refrigerator. He made Lily change into dry clothes, then tucked her into bed with 2 extra blankets and her stuffed fox. He set a glass of water and the pill bottle on the crate beside her. "You need to take one of these now," he said, twisting the cap. "They taste gross," she complained. "You do not know that yet," he said. He tried a smile. "Maybe it tastes like candy." "Nothing that helps ever tastes like candy," she said. He almost laughed. Instead, he handed her the white tablet and watched to make sure she swallowed it. That night, he slept lightly, waking at every cough. He kept a hand near her forehead, checking the fever. It came down a little, then climbed again. 2 days passed like that. Lily's breathing turned raspy. She sweated through her pajamas, then shivered, asking for more blankets. Her cheeks flushed and pale by turns. The antibiotics did not seem to be winning. Jack called the clinic. The nurse on the phone told him to give it more time to keep her hydrated, to bring her in again if she struggled to breathe. He stood at the window after hanging up, watching his breath fog the glass. Outside, rain streaked the view of the parking lot. Inside, the air felt thin. The bank app on his phone showed numbers that barely covered the coming rent even before the increase. There was no room in those numbers for another clinic visit, let alone a hospital bill. In the bedroom, Lily coughed. The sound was wet and harsh from deep inside. It made every muscle in him tighten. He went to her side. Her skin was hot, but her hands were cold. She blinked up at him, eyes unfocused. "Dad," she whispered, "my chest hurts." "I know," he said. "I know, honey." He sat on the edge of the bed and stayed there until her breathing steadied a little. When she fell into another shallow sleep, he went to the kitchen. The drawer by the stove was where he kept the things that mattered. Not many, but enough that he liked to have them together under his hand if he needed them. Inside lay folded bills, a cheap calculator, the lease, the termination notice, the rent increase. At the back was a small creased envelope with a candy wrapper tucked inside. Butterscotch, the gold foil wrinkled. Next to it lay a cream-colored business card. Claire Whitmore, Whitmore Hope Fund, a cell number in neat black print. He picked up the card between his thumb and forefinger. For a long moment, he did nothing but stare at it. His mind churned. He could not call her. He had told himself that the day he slipped the card into his wallet, he had not told her the story to get anything. He would not be one of those people who saw a lifeline and grabbed it without thinking of the strain on the other end. He imagined her in that big house on the hill, surrounded by things that cost more than his truck was worth. A widow who did not need some man from the wrong side of the city dragging his trouble to her doorstep. He set the card down. In the bedroom, Lily coughed again. The sound seemed to vibrate in the walls. He picked the card up. His thumb ran over the embossed letters. He thought about Daniel on the concrete step outside the diner, holding out that first small piece of butterscotch. "You cannot fix everything with a piece of candy," Daniel had said, "but you can make someone feel seen." Jack closed his eyes. This was not about him. It was about a kid whose chest hurt when she breathed long in a bed in an apartment that felt like ice. His hands were shaking as he reached for his phone. He punched in the numbers from the card before he could talk himself out of it. The line rang once, twice. He almost hung up. On the third ring, someone answered. "Hello?" a woman's voice said. "Claire," he said. The word came out rough. He tightened his grip on the phone. "This is Jack, from the cemetery." There was a brief pause, a soft intake of breath. "I remember," she said. "What is wrong?" He leaned against the counter, his knees suddenly weak. "I am sorry to bother you," he began. The apology felt useless even as he said it. "My daughter Lily, she is sick. Pneumonia. The clinic gave us medicine, but she is not getting better, and the heat is out, and I have lost my job, and I do not know who else to call." He heard himself rambling and clamped his mouth shut. On the other end, there was no hesitation. "Tell me your address," Claire said. He did. His voice shook on the building name. "Stay there," she said. "Do not move her. I am coming." The line clicked as the call ended. Jack lowered the phone slowly. The apartment was very quiet. The only sounds were the faint hum of the refrigerator and Lily's labored breathing from the other room. He set the phone on the table and pressed both hands flat beside it, trying to steady himself. The minutes after the call stretched thin. Jack paced between the kitchen and the bedroom, listening to Lily's breathing. He tried to straighten things that did not need straightening, stacking mail, wiping a counter that already shone. It did nothing to make the place look less small. He checked the street through the window every few seconds. The parking lot shimmered under a weak light, puddles reflecting the glow. A stray grocery cart leaned against the dumpster. The world outside looked damp and ordinary, indifferent to the panic in his chest. In the bedroom, Lily stirred and coughed. He went in, adjusted the blankets, brushed damp hair from her forehead. "You okay, bug?" he asked. She did not open her eyes, just made a small sound, and turned toward his voice. Her breathing stayed shallow. A car engine sounded in the lot, different from the usual sputter of old sedans. Jack went to the window. A dark SUV rolled in headlights sweeping across the cracked asphalt. It pulled into a spot near the entrance and stilled. The engine cut off. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the cooling metal. The driver's door opened. Claire stepped out. She looked out of place in the lot in her tailored coat and leather boots, but she moved with purpose, not hesitation. She glanced up at the building, found the unit number he had given her, and headed for the stairwell. Jack opened his apartment door before she could knock. The hallway light flickered overhead, casting her in a stuttered glow. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. Claire took him in with one quick look. The lines around his eyes were deeper than at the cemetery, his shoulders more hunched. Then she looked past him into the apartment. The cold hit her at once, a flat, heavy chill that slid under her coat and sat on her skin. She could see her breath in the doorway. "This is with the radiators off?" she asked. "Has been 3 days," Jack answered. "Landlord says he is working on it." Her jaw tightened, but she did not comment further. She stepped inside, eyes moving over the room without lingering. The sagging couch, the table with the scattered bills, the towels pinned over the windows. "Where is Lily?" she asked. "In here," he said, gesturing to the bedroom. Claire crossed to the doorway. The room was dim, the only light coming from a narrow gap in the curtain, where it did not quite meet the wall. Lily lay in the small bed, a cocoon of mismatched blankets, cheeks flushed, lips pale. Her breath had a rasp to it that made Claire's chest hurt just to hear it. She knelt beside the bed without worrying about her coat. Her hand went automatically to Lily's forehead. "She is burning up," Claire said. Her voice had lost the cool distance it held at the cemetery. This was flat assessment mixed with concern. She rested 2 fingers on the inside of Lily's wrist, counting the pulse. "She was at the clinic 2 days ago," Jack said behind her. "They said pneumonia, gave her antibiotics." Claire glanced at the small bottle on the crate that served as a nightstand. It stood next to a glass of water half full, a straw bent at the top. "Has she kept them down?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "She takes them. The fever just will not quit." Lily's eyes flickered open. She stared at Claire for a moment, as if deciding who this new shape beside her bed belonged to. "Hi," Lily said, voice thin. "Hi, sweetheart," Claire answered. "I am Claire. We met your dad at the cemetery." "With the flowers," Lily murmured. "For the man who helped us." "That is right," Claire said softly. Lily's eyes slid closed again. Claire stood. "She needs a doctor to look at her now," she said. "Not a clinic in 3 days." He spread his hands helplessly. "I spent what I had on the first visit. I tried calling the boiler repair and the landlord and looking for work, and I just—" His words tangled. He stopped pressing his lips together. Claire's gaze shifted from Lily to the walls, to the frost that had formed at the edges of the single-pane window. "You cannot keep her here," she said. The decision formed even as the words left her mouth. "Pack what you need. You are both coming with me." Jack blinked. "We cannot just move into your house," he said. "I did not call you for that." "I know you did not," she replied. "I also know this temperature is not safe for her. I have room. I have heat. I have a doctor who will come when I call. This is the best option on the table." Her tone had shifted from explanation to simple fact. He shook his head. "Claire, I appreciate it, I really do, but you do not know us. People will talk. Your family will think I am taking advantage." "I do not care what people will say," she answered. "I care that there is a 7-year-old in a freezing apartment with pneumonia." She met his eyes. For the first time he saw something in them that was not just grief. There was steel there. "Daniel would not have walked away from this," she said. "Neither will I." The name lodged between them like a third presence. Jack looked back toward the bed. Lily's small frame shifted as she coughed again. He exhaled slowly. "Okay," he said. "Okay." He grabbed the duffel bag from his corner of the room and started throwing clothes into it, trying to think through the fog of panic. Socks, jeans, t-shirts, Lily's pajamas with the faded unicorns, her stuffed fox, her toothbrush. Claire stayed with Lily, murmuring something low and soothing. When Jack was done, he lifted Lily carefully, blankets and all. She was lighter than she should have been. Her head fell against his shoulder. Her breath warmed his neck, but her hands were cold where they clutched his shirt. The hallway felt even colder with his arms full. At the top of the stairs, Claire reached for the duffel. "I have it," she said. "You do not have to carry my stuff," he started. "Jack," she said, already slinging the strap over her shoulder, "you have more important things in your arms." He did not argue. Outside, the rain had turned to a fine mist. The air felt almost warm compared to the apartment. The SUV's interior lights blinked on when Claire pressed the key fob. Leather seats, clean dashboard, the faint smell of something floral and expensive. She opened the back door. Jack slid in with Lily still wrapped in blankets, settling her so her head could rest in his lap. Claire put the duffel in the back, then climbed behind the wheel. As they pulled out of the lot, the apartment building receded behind them. The towels over the windows fluttered slightly in the wind, then sank back. No one watched from the doorway. No one knew they were leaving. City lights blurred on the wet windshield. Jack watched them pass, feeling unmoored. It had taken so long to claw his way into that apartment. Now he was leaving it in 15 minutes, with everything important stuffed in a single bag and a child on his legs. "How far is your place?" he asked. "About 20 minutes, Claire said. "Up on Queen Anne Hill." The name meant something to him. A different world, houses with views, streets that did not flood when drains clogged. He looked down at Lily. Her breathing sounded slightly less ragged in the warm car, or maybe that was just wishful thinking. Her cheeks still burned. Claire drove with both hands on the wheel, gaze steady. The dashboard lights traced the curve of her jaw, the tight set of her mouth. He could see in the way she gripped the steering wheel that she was holding something in check. They climbed higher, leaving behind the cramped streets and strip malls. Trees appeared along the sides of the road, branches dripping rain. The houses grew larger, more spaced out, front yards trimmed and lit. When Claire turned into a driveway, the tires hummed on smooth stone. The house that rose ahead of them was mostly glass and wood, 2 stories with wide windows and soft light spilling from within. A porch stretched along the back, though from this angle Jack only caught a glimpse. Behind the main house slightly to the side sat a smaller structure, 1-story wood siding a small porch of its own. The windows were dark. Claire parked near it. "That is the guest house," she said, following his gaze. "You will stay there. It has hot water, 2 beds. It is quieter than the main house." He nodded, trying to absorb the idea of being allowed to exist anywhere on this property. They got out into the mist. The air smelled different here. Wet earth cedar, a hint of something from the bay. Claire unlocked the front door of the guest house. The hinges gave a soft sound as it swung inward. Warm air wrapped around them. The interior was simple but clean. A small living area with a sofa and armchair, a low table with a stack of books. A kitchen with gleaming countertops and a row of blue mugs hanging from hooks. Down a short hallway, 2 doors stood open on bedrooms. The walls were a soft cream, the hardwood floor warm underfoot. Jack carried Lily straight to the nearer bedroom. The bed was already made with fresh sheets and a quilt that smelled faintly of lavender. He laid her down gently and tugged the covers up. Her eyes fluttered open, then closed again. "This bed is squishy," she murmured. "You can tell me all about it when you feel better," he said. Claire was already on her phone, walking a few steps away to speak. Her voice was low and quick when the call connected. "Dr. Benton, it is Claire. I need you to come to the house. It is a child this time, 7. Pneumonia diagnosis at a clinic 2 days ago. Fever still high, breathing rough. Yes. The guest house." She listened, nodded, and hung up. "He will be here within the hour," she said, returning to the doorway. "He is thorough." Jack sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped, suddenly unsure whether he should stay in the bedroom or get out of the way. "You can use whatever is in the kitchen," Claire said. "Food, tea, anything, towels in the bathroom, extra blankets in the closet, though you will not need them." Her eyes drifted briefly around the room, as if seeing it fresh. She had not slept in here since before Daniel died. The guest house had stood empty all those months, a space she did not enter because it felt too quiet. Now there was a child in the bed and a man helplessly guarding the door. "Thank you," Jack said. The words felt small compared to what she was doing. "This is not a favor," she replied. "You are not a project. There is a sick kid who needs a warm room and a doctor. Everything else is noise." He nodded, not trusting himself to say more. She hesitated at the threshold, then turned and stepped out into the small living area. Through the front window, Jack saw her cross the short path toward the main house. Between the 2 structures, a large tree stood, branches reaching up toward the low clouds. From one thick limb hung a wooden porch swing, its seat slick with rain chains rusted in places. It moved slightly in the breeze, a slow creak. A porch light by the guest house door was dark. As she passed, Claire reached up and flipped the switch inside the entryway. The bulb flickered once, then glowed steadily, casting a warm pool of light over the front step. Jack watched that light for a moment. It made the small house feel less like a borrowed space and more like something else. The doctor arrived as promised, an older man with gray hair and a worn leather bag. He introduced himself to Jack with a firm, brief handshake, then went straight to Lily's bedside. In the bedroom, he listened to Lily's lungs, checked her oxygen levels, asked questions about when the fever had started, what the clinic had prescribed. His face stayed calm but focused. "Her lungs are working hard," he said quietly after a few minutes. "We will adjust the antibiotic and add something to help with the inflammation. This is serious, but she is strong. We are catching it before it gets worse." He scribbled notes, made a call for medication to be delivered, and left instructions for fluids and rest. He gave Jack his own card as he left. "You call me directly if her breathing changes," he said. "Any time of day." Jack nodded, the card light in his fingers. When the door closed behind the doctor, the house settled into a different kind of quiet. Not the empty quiet of the apartment, but something softer. The hum of the heater, the faint tick of the thermostat, Lily's breathing growing a little steadier. Jack stepped into the living room. The fire in the gas fireplace flickered behind glass, sending out a gentle, even warmth. He held his hands toward it, feeling the sting as feeling returned to his fingertips. On the kitchen counter, someone had already stocked the fridge. Milk, eggs, containers of soup, a loaf of bread in a paper bag like the one he had brought home to Lily days before. He stood there for a long time, caught between relief and guilt. The comfort of the space pressed in on him, unfamiliar and almost unwelcome. Through the small window over the sink, he could see the main house. Lights burned in a few windows. A single figure moved past one, then another. Claire going through her own rooms, no doubt replaying the choices she had just made. Jack turned back toward the bedroom. He walked softly down the hall and paused in the doorway. Lily slept more peacefully now, her face less flushed. She clutched her stuffed fox under her chin. The quilt rose and fell in a slow rhythm. He pulled the door almost closed, leaving a crack so he could hear if she called out. Back in the living room, he sank onto the sofa. The cushions gave under his weight. The fire whispered behind the glass. For the first time in days, the ache in his shoulders began to loosen. He let his head fall back and closed his eyes, still listening for any change in Lily's breathing. The porch light burned outside the window, steady against the dark. Lily's fever broke on the second night. It did not happen all at once. The numbers on the thermometer inched down over hours, from frightening to simply too high, then to something that let Jack breathe a little easier. Her cheeks lost their fierce red. Her skin grew less hot under his palm. She still coughed, but there were longer stretches between fits, and her chest did not rattle quite as much. On the morning of the third day, Jack woke on the sofa to the sound of a small voice. "Dad?" Lily called. "I am hungry." The two words hit him harder than any alarm. He sat up, blankets sliding off his shoulders, and hurried down the hall. Lily was sitting up in bed, hair a mess, quilt pulled around her waist. Her eyes were clearer than they had been in days. "Hey," he said, the relief almost dizzying. "Look who is awake." "I am starving," she said. "Do they have cereal here?" He laughed, a short sound that surprised him. "They might," he said. "This is a fancy place." "I want the kind with the little marshmallows," she announced. "You get regular cereal," he replied. "We are guests, not pirates." She wrinkled her nose. "What if I draw you something really good? Then can I get marshmallows?" "We can negotiate later," he said. "First, real food." He helped her swing her legs over the side of the bed. She wobbled when she stood, so he scooped her up without asking and carried her to the kitchen. Her arms went around his neck, surprisingly strong for someone who had been so sick. The kitchen felt warmer today. Sunlight filtered through the small window over the sink, turning the steam from the kettle into a soft cloud. Jack set Lily down at the table. She pulled herself into a chair, clutching her stuffed fox. The fridge held more food than he knew what to do with. Yogurt, fresh fruit, a carton of orange juice with a cap that had not yet been twisted off. He poured cereal into a bowl, added milk, and set it in front of Lily. She took a bite, chewed, then nodded. "It is okay," she said, as if giving a review. "Not as good as marshmallows." "I will write a strongly worded letter," he said. The door to the guest house opened a few minutes later. Claire stepped in carrying a grocery bag. Her hair was pulled back in a loose tie, and she wore a thick sweater instead of her usual structured coat. She paused when she saw Lily at the tablespoon in hand. "Well," Claire said, "someone looks a little less like a baked tomato." Lily smiled shyly. "I am not hot anymore," she said, "only tired." "That is progress," Claire replied. She put the bag on the counter and began unloading it. There were more groceries inside, soup in glass jars, a carton of eggs, fresh bread. "How did you sleep?" "She actually snored," Jack said, "which I am choosing to be grateful for." Lily gasped. "I do not snore." "You sounded like a baby dragon," he said, "a polite one." Claire watched them with a small, softening expression. "I spoke to Dr. Benton this morning," she said. "He is pleased with how fast she responded to the new medication. He wants her to rest a couple more days, then short walks if she feels up to it." Lily perked up. "Walks where?" "Just around here," Claire said. "We have a yard. There is a swing." Lily's eyes widened. "Like a real swing, not just a tree branch." "A real one," Claire confirmed. After breakfast, Lily drifted back to the bedroom, tired again but without the same heaviness. She curled up with a book someone had left on the nightstand, tracing the illustrations with her finger. Jack felt like a spring that had been wound too tight for too long. Now, with the immediate crisis easing, the tension had nowhere to go. He could not sit still. He washed dishes that did not need washing, wiped the counter twice, checked on Lily, checked his phone. Nothing changed on the screen. No new messages, no job offers. He stepped outside to get a breath of air. The porch light was off in the daylight, but its glass still held a faint memory of last night's glow. The air smelled of damp cedar and cut grass. The rain had finally paused, leaving the world washed and quiet. From the porch he could see more of the yard, a wide stretch of lawn flower beds still sleeping through winter, a gravel path that curved toward the main house. The big tree between the two buildings stood like a sentinel. The swing hung from one of its lower branches. A wooden seat long enough for two people suspended by chains hooked to thick bolts in the wood. Rust streaked down from the metal. When the breeze picked up, the swing moved slightly, and the chains made a thin, complaining sound. Jack walked over. He put a hand on the chain, feeling the rough patches under his fingers. His mind cataloged the problem without trying. Corrosion, friction, neglect. He looked toward the main house. No faces in the windows. The place sat like something from a magazine, glass and wood and stone and clean lines. He moved past the swing toward a small shed tucked along the fence line. The door stuck a little, then gave. Inside he found neat rows of tools. A rake, a shovel, a toolbox with wrenches in their proper places. A can of lubricant half full. He picked up the can and a rag and went back to the swing. The work was simple. He wiped away the rust where he could apply oil to the joints, worked the chains back and forth until the squeak softened. He checked the bolts in the branch, testing their hold. Then he sat carefully on the swing and shifted his weight. It moved under him with only a faint, smooth sound. He pushed off gently with his heels. The swing glided forward and back, the tree creaking softly. He let the motion continue for a moment, then stopped, and stood feeling strangely lighter. He did not hear Claire approach until she spoke. "I used to sit there with a book and a glass of iced tea," she said from a few feet away. "Daniel would complain that I was going to wear out the chains." Jack turned. She stood with her hands in the pockets of her sweater watching the swing. "It was squeaking," he said. "Seemed like it was annoyed." "At me, probably," she replied. "I have not been out here much." She stepped closer, reached out and ran her fingers along the edge of the wooden seat. The wood was smoother now where he had wiped it down. "He hung it the year we moved in," she said. "Said every house needs a swing. I did not know how to fix it when it started to rust. I just listened to it complain." He shrugged. "It is a simple fix," he said. "Now you can make it squeak on purpose if you miss the sound." That got a real smile from her, brief but genuine. "Thank you," she said. He nodded, a little embarrassed by the sense of accomplishment given everything else that was broken in his life. Over the next few days, a rhythm formed in the guest house. Mornings, Jack checked Lily's fever and coaxed her into eating. Late morning, if the weather allowed, he helped her bundle up and walk slowly along the gravel path, her hand in his, taking small steps, breathing cool air in careful amounts. Afternoons when she napped, he wandered the property. He reset loose stones in the path, pulled early weeds from the beds, tightened a hinge on the gate. At the side yard, that squealed whenever it moved. He found the small tasks that houses bred and took care of them before they grew. He did not ask permission. The work calmed him. It gave him something to do that did not involve numbers on a screen ticking lower. He saw Claire coming and going from the main house. Sometimes she was on the phone, a file in hand. Sometimes she simply stood at the back windows, looking out at the tree and the swing, her expression distant. Twice she came to the guest house in the evening with a covered dish, soup one night, a casserole another. She brought enough for 3 and stayed long enough to see that Lily ate. One afternoon, when Lily was well enough to be bored, she commandeered the small table in the living room. Crayons, markers, and paper covered the surface. Jack watched from the sofa as she drew. "What are you working on?" he asked. "You will see," she said, no peeking. She stuck her tongue out slightly, concentrating, her hand moving in careful strokes. She chose colors, paused, decided, and returned to the page. When she finally finished, she held up the sheet. 3 figures stood under a big yellow sun. One tall one, medium one, small. They had stick arms and 2 big smiles. Behind them was a rectangle with windows and a little porch. From a branch nearby hung a brown shape that was clearly a swing. "That is you," she said, pointing to the tallest stick person. "That is me, and that is Miss Claire." Jack studied the picture. "You made my hair look better than in real life," he said. "You have pointy hair," she replied. "It is hard to draw." She traced the outline of the swing with her finger. "I like it here," she said. "It feels not like the other place." "It feels different," he agreed. "Can I give this to Miss Claire?" Lily asked suddenly. She looks sad when she thinks nobody is watching. The observation caught him off guard. He had noticed the way Claire's face changed when she thought no one was looking, the way her shoulders drooped, the way her hands tightened around a coffee mug. He had not expected Lily to see it so clearly. "If you want to," he said. Lily hopped down from the chair clutching the drawing. She was still a little unsteady, so Jack walked with her along the path to the main house. The sun sat low, casting long shadows. The swing moved gently in the breeze. My mud be sore. At the back door, Lily knocked with the confidence of someone who had already decided she was welcome. Claire opened the door a moment later, a dish towel over one shoulder. The kitchen behind her was warm, all wood and stone, and stainless steel appliances that glinted in the light. "Lily," she said, surprised. "And Jack, is everything all right?" "I made you something," Lily said, holding the paper out with both hands. Claire took it carefully as if it might tear. She looked at the drawing for a long moment. Her eyes moved from the sun to the house to the three figures with their linked hands. "This is beautiful," she said. Her voice was softer than usual. "Is this my swing?" "Yes," Lily said. "Dad fixed it." Claire glanced at Jack. "I noticed," she said. She looked back at the drawing. Something shifted in her face. The hard set around her mouth eased. Fine lines at the corners of her eyes relaxed. "Can I put this on my fridge?" she asked. "That is where it is supposed to go," Lily answered. Claire smiled then. It was not the careful, polite smile she had worn at the cemetery. It reached her eyes this time, crinkling the skin at the corners. "Then that is where it will live," she said. She stepped back, opening the door wider. "Do you both want to come in for a minute?" she asked. "I have lemonade and tea that does not taste like boiled socks." Lily looked up at Jack, already half-turned toward the warm light inside. He hesitated for a heartbeat, feeling again the invisible line between their world and Claire's. Then he nodded. "Sure," he said. For a minute, they sat at the large wooden table in the kitchen. Lily swung her feet above the floor, chattering about the book she was reading and the picture she had drawn for her class wall. Claire listened, asked questions, laughed more than once. On the fridge held in place by a plain magnet, Lily's drawing took its place among a few scattered photographs. In one, Daniel and Claire stood on a beach, wind whipping their hair. In another, Daniel sat on the swing, his feet barely touching the ground, a book open in his hands. Later, when Lily had been gently herded back to the guest house and tucked into bed, Claire walked back to the refrigerator. She stood in front of the drawing for a time, fingers brushing the edge of the paper. Three figures under a sun in front of a house. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel entirely alone in her own kitchen. A few days later, they sat outside near the swing. Lily was on the seat jacket, zipped hat pulled low, letting herself sway a little. Jack stood nearby, hands in his pockets. Claire sat on the porch step with a mug cupped in both hands. "The foundation has been busy," she said, breaking a comfortable silence. "Whitmore Hope Fund. We are getting more applications every month." Jack turned slightly. "That is good, right?" he said. "Means you are reaching people." "It is," she replied. "It is also a lot to manage. My brother-in-law Nate is handling the numbers, the approvals. I try to keep up with the stories, the faces. Sometimes they get lost in the stack." She watched Lily for a moment as the swing moved. "You said at the cemetery that you wanted to pay Daniel back by helping someone else," Claire said. "That you never got the chance." Jack felt his cheeks warm. "I said a lot of things," he replied. "I am not sure how useful I would be in an office." "Useful is not the word I would use," she said. "Needed is closer." She glanced at him. "You have been on the other side of those applications. You know what it feels like to fill out a form when your life is falling apart. I think the foundation could use someone like that going through the files, talking to people." He looked at her, trying to read her expression. There was no pity there, just a steady, thoughtful regard. "You are offering me a job," he said slowly. "I am offering you an opportunity," she answered. "If you want it." Lily jumped off the swing and ran over, cheeks pink from the cold. "What is an opportunity?" she asked. "A door that opens," Claire said. Lily considered that. "Are we going through it?" she asked her father. Jack looked between them. The guest house behind him glowed with the promise of warmth. The main house stood solid and still. The memory of the diner of Daniel's envelope hovered in the back of his mind. "I would like that," he said. "Very much." Claire nodded once, as if that settled it. "Then we will start with introductions," she said. "You will meet Nate at the office next week." Lily grinned. "Can I draw a picture for the office?" she asked. "I think they could use some color," Claire replied. Jack let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. The swing creaked softly as the breeze picked up chains moving easily on their oiled hooks. The porch light over the guest house clicked on as the day slipped toward evening, casting a warm circle at the door. The Whitmore Hope Fund office occupied the second floor of a brick building above a coffee shop and a nail salon. On the street, people walked under umbrellas, juggling paper cups and phones. The smell of roasted beans drifted up the stairwell as Jack climbed. He wiped his hands on his jeans once before pushing open the frosted glass door. Inside, the space was smaller than he had imagined. No marble foyer, no reception desk with a smiling attendant. Just a few desks, a copier in the corner, and walls lined with photographs. Photographs in simple frames. Families in front of new houses. Veterans in wheelchairs on sunlit porches. Kids holding backpacks almost as big as they were. Smiles that looked less posed and more relieved. A woman with curly hair glanced up from her computer and offered a quick hello. A man at the far desk nodded. Phones rang softly. Keys clicked. Near the window, a tall man in a dark suit closed a file and stood. His hair was neater than Daniel's, in the photographs his jaw set in a straighter line. His tie was perfect. His eyes were cool. "Jack Rivera," the man said, coming forward with his hand out. "I am Nate Whitmore." Jack shook his hand. Nate's grip was firm, the shake brief. "Claire has told me some about you," Nate said. "Thank you for coming in." "Thank you for having me," Jack replied. Nate gestured toward an empty desk pushed against the wall. A computer sat on its screen dark. A stack of file folders waited beside the keyboard. "This will be you," Nate said. "We keep things modest here. Most of the money goes out, not into the furniture." "It looks good," Jack said. He meant it. The place felt like it had a purpose, not like an office someone had decorated for show. Nate pointed toward the photos on the walls. "Those are some of our grant recipients," he said. "Emergency rent medical bills, small business loans. We write checks, but we try to know who they are before we do." Jack moved closer to one of the frames. A woman stood in front of a tiny restaurant holding a set of keys. Her smile was wide, but there was a tightness around her eyes that he recognized. "What we need from you is simple," Nate said. "We receive a lot of requests. Some are genuine, some are not. Some fall somewhere in between. You will read applications, call applicants, verify details. We cannot help everyone. We prioritize. You help us decide. You help us decide who fits, who does not." Jack nodded slowly. "So I am between them and the check." "Think of yourself as a filter," Nate said. "A practical one." He walked over to a small table in the corner. On it sat a glass jar filled with gold-wrapped candies. Butterscotch. The light from the window glinted off the wrappers. Nate tapped the lid with his knuckles. "Daniel started this habit," he said. "He kept candy around so people did not feel like the only reason they came in here was to ask for money. Said it made the place feel less like a bank, more like a kitchen table." Jack stared at the jar. For a moment, he was back under the yellow light outside the diner, a small piece of butterscotch resting in his hand. "He gave me one," Jack said quietly. Nate glanced at him. "Claire told me about that," he said. His voice did not warm, but it did soften. He liked to do things like that. Small gestures, big checks. He lifted the jar and set it on the corner of Jack's new desk. "Here," Nate said. "If you are going to talk to people about their worst days, you might as well have something to offer them, besides questions." Jack managed a small smile. "Thanks." Nate returned to his own desk. "For now, start with these," he said, placing a stack of folders in front of Jack. "Read, make notes, flag anything that does not add up. Tomorrow, you can start calling." He picked up a file of his own and began to work the conversation clearly over. Jack sat down. The chair squeaked once and then settled. He opened the top folder. Inside was a form filled out in neat, careful handwriting. Name, address, number of dependents. A brief paragraph explaining why the applicant needed help. Attached was a copy of an overdue notice from an electric company. A photograph of 3 kids sitting on a worn sofa, one holding a stuffed bear. He read every line. Then he opened the next folder. The hours slid by that way. Paper ink stories pressed into boxes and short answers. He saw patterns. People who used the same phrases, the same excuses. People who did not give enough detail. People who gave too much desperate to be heard. Twice he stood and walked to the window, stretching his back. Outside, cars moved in steady lines. On the sidewalk, someone shielded a stroller from a gust of wind. He thought of the times he had sat in borrowed waiting rooms, filling out forms with the same kind of pen, trying to make his situation sound urgent without sounding hopeless. He thought of how it felt when someone behind a desk barely looked up, When he finally checked the time, it was late afternoon. The coffee shop below had turned up its music. The smell of roasted beans was stronger. "Not too overwhelming?" the curly-haired woman asked as she passed his desk on her way to the copier. "I have had more confusing piles of paper," Jack said. She laughed. "Give it a week." Nate called him into the small glass-walled room they used as a meeting space. He closed the door behind them. The walls did not quite reach the ceiling, so the sounds of the office filtered in muffled. "First impressions?" Nate asked. "It is a lot," Jack admitted. "But it feels important. These are not just numbers." Nate nodded once. "That is why we have to be careful," he said. "You understand we cannot help everyone who asks." "I know," Jack said. "I also know what it feels like to be on the other side of this." Nate studied him for a moment. "That is why Claire wanted you here," he said. "She thinks you will see things we might miss." The way he said "she" held something Jack could not quite read. Protective, maybe? Or wary? "We do good work," Nate continued. "Daniel built this place to be a safety net, not a bottomless well. Our job is to stretch the net as far as it can go without tearing." "Clear." "Clear," Jack said. On his way back to his desk, he passed the jar of butterscotch. He picked one out without thinking and set it next to his keyboard. He did not unwrap it. It felt right, just sitting there. By the time he headed back up the hill that evening, the sky had darkened. The guest house porch light glowed like a small beacon in the gray. He parked the truck along the curb outside Claire's property and walked the familiar stone path. The swing under the tree moved slightly in the breeze, its chains giving a soft, low sound. Through the window of the guest house, he could see Lily at the table homework, spread out in front of her feet bare. She looked up as he opened the door. "You are late," she announced. "I have a job again," he said. "That is what happens when people with jobs go to work." She pushed her chair back and ran at him, colliding with his legs. He scooped her up, hugging her tight. "Did you help people?" she asked, pulling back enough to see his face. "Not yet," he said. "Today I just read about them. Tomorrow I call." "Do you have an office?" she asked. "I have a desk," he said, "and a candy jar." Her eyes lit up. "Real candy?" "Real candy," he said. "Butterscotch." She sighed dramatically. "You are so lucky." Claire appeared in the doorway of the small kitchen, a dish towel draped over her shoulder. She wore jeans and a simple blouse, her feet in socks. The sight of her without the armor of the coat made her look softer, somehow more like someone who lived here, and less like someone visiting her own life. "How was it?" she asked. "Busy," he said. "Good. Strange." She nodded as if that matched what she had expected. "Dinner is almost ready," she said. "If you want to wash up." He did. The water in the guest house bathroom ran hot and clean. He watched the day swirl down the drain, then returned to the table. They ate together. Pasta salad bread warmed in the oven. Lily talked about school, about the frog incident in the classroom, and how Mrs. Chan had almost stepped on it. Jack shared a few details about the office, careful not to mention names, just impressions. "They have pictures on the walls," he said, "of people the fund has helped. It is good to see the results." "Daniel insisted on that," Claire said. "He did not want the money to feel like it disappeared into spreadsheets." Nate's name came up only once when Claire mentioned he had a board meeting later in the week. "He works hard," she said. "He keeps the fund alive." There was affection there, and something like obligation. After dinner, Claire gathered plates. Jack stood to help. They moved around each other in the small kitchen, with a tentative ease passing dishes, bumping shoulders once, and murmuring apologies. Lily sat back at the table drawing. This time the picture was of a building with big windows and the word HOPE written over the door in crooked letters. "That is the office," she explained when Jack asked. "The place where you give people money." "We try to give them more than that," he said. "Like candy," she said. "Exactly," he replied. Later, after Lily had gone to bed and the guest house had quieted, Jack stepped outside for air. The main house's back windows glowed. Through one he could see Claire standing at her kitchen sink, hands braced on the edge, head bowed slightly. He did not want to intrude, so he turned his eyes away up toward the tree. The swing hung still shadows cutting across the wood. The porch light cast a circle at his feet. At the fund office the next day, he began making calls. He sat with a list of applicants, their phone numbers written in neat columns. He dialed, waited, listened to the ring. Some calls went to voicemail. Some numbers were disconnected. Some voices answered tired and wary, as if bracing for bad news. He introduced himself. He explained the fund asked questions. He tried to keep his tone calm and respectful, to leave space for people to answer without rushing them. He listened to stories that sounded painfully familiar and stories that were utterly different. A woman talked about choosing between rent and her son's asthma medication. A man explained how a car repair had eaten the money he had set aside for utilities. An older couple described a roof leak that had turned into a mold problem, pushing them out of the bedroom they had slept in for 30 years. He made notes, his pen moving quickly. He jotted down not just the facts, but impressions: pride, shame, resilience. He put a small mark next to the ones where the voice on the other end of the line reminded him of his own from that winter outside the diner. Once during a lull between calls, he looked up and found Nate watching him from his office doorway. Nate's expression gave nothing away. "Everything all right?" Jack asked. "Just seeing how you are settling in," Nate said. He glanced at the notepad on Jack's desk. "You are taking a lot of notes." "I do not want to miss anything," Jack said. said. Nate nodded slowly. "Just remember," he said, "we have limited resources. We cannot take on every story that tugs at your heart. This is not a personal rescue mission." "I know," Jack said. He kept his voice even. "I am not trying to save the world. Just help decide where the money lands." Nate held his gaze for a beat longer, then returned to his office. In the late afternoon, as the light outside shifted toward evening, the office quieted. People finished calls, closed files, shut down computers. Jack gathered his things. He slipped a butterscotch candy into his pocket for Lily. As he headed for the door, the curly-haired woman called after him. "We are glad you are here," she said. "Claire was right. You see things different." "Different is one word for it," he said. On his way home, he thought about the stack of applications he had flagged as urgent. He trusted his judgment, but he also felt the weight of each choice. Every yes implied a no somewhere else. At the top of the hill, he turned into the familiar street. The swing under the tree came into view, first, then the outline of the guest house, the porch light already on, even though there was still a little color in the sky. Inside, the smell of something baking greeted him. Lily's laughter followed. For the moment, there was a roof over their heads, a table to sit at and work. That meant something waiting for him in the morning. In another office across town, Nate sat at his own desk long after everyone else had left, looking at the latest balance sheet for the fund. He traced a finger along the columns, then glanced at the list of new approvals. Jack's name appeared in the margin, a small note indicating which applications he had recommended. Nate leaned back in his chair. In the quiet, he could hear the faint rattle of the heating vents. He rubbed his eyes, then set the paper down. On the corner of his desk sat an old photograph of Daniel Younger, laughing, holding up a jar of butterscotch candy like a joke. "You picked a complicated one, brother," Nate murmured to the empty room. He reached for a candy from his own jar, unwrapped it, and let it sit on his tongue, the taste sweet and sharp, lingering longer than he would have admitted. Rain returned the next week and stayed. It drummed on the roof of the fund office, tapped at the windows, streaked the glass, until the world outside blurred. Inside, the air smelled faintly of wet wool and coffee. Jack settled into his routine. He arrived early, poured himself a mug from the communal pot, and sat at his desk with a stack of applications. He read, he called, he listened. He passed recommendations to Nate and the small team that handled approvals. More than once, someone at the other end of the line cried when he told them the fund would help with a bill. He tried to keep his voice steady during those calls to absorb the emotion without letting it knock him over. He went home to the guest house every evening and pretended not to notice how easily Lily moved around the little space. Now, how she left her books on the arm of the sofa and her socks near the door, as if this place had always been theirs. Claire joined them for dinner more often. Sometimes she brought takeout, sometimes she cooked. Jack helped with dishes. They talked about small things. The weather. A movie Lily wanted to see. The time Daniel had tried to fix the washing machine himself and flooded the laundry room. Nate came up to the house a few times for dinner. He stayed mostly in the main house with Claire going over fund reports, talking board members, and budgets. Once he stopped by the guest house door to drop off a folder Jack had left at the office. "Looks like your desk is already a disaster," Nate said, glancing past Jack at the papers on the table. "Organized disaster," Jack replied. Jack replied. Nate handed him the folder. "Just remember, every approval has a cost," he said. "The money is not endless." "I know," Jack said. "I count it too." The comment hung between them for a moment. Nate nodded once and headed back along the path, his coat catching drops of rain. For a while, the uneasy balance held. Jack worked. Lily grew stronger. Claire let a little more light into her house and into her routines. Then the tension began to surface. It started with numbers. At the office, Nate stood over a printout one Thursday morning, his brow furrowed. Columns of figures marched across the page, red circles around some of them. He called Jack into the glass-walled meeting room. "Close the door," Nate said. Jack did. The murmur of phones and keyboards softened. Nate tapped the paper. "Approvals are up 20% this month," he said. "We have not increased incoming funds by 20%. "You asked me to give honest recommendations," Jack replied. "These are the cases that seemed urgent." "I am not questioning that," Nate said. "I am asking you to remember that urgency is not rare. Everyone who walks through our door is desperate. You of all people know that." Jack felt the words land. "I am not handing out money like candy," he said. "I am looking at what they need, what they are doing to help themselves, what our support would change." "I know your heart is in the right place," Nate said. "That is not always an asset in this role." The line stung. Jack kept his face neutral. "Are you telling me to say no more often?" he asked. "I am telling you to remember that this is a fund, not a personal crusade," Nate said. "You live in my sister-in-law's guest house. You work in my brother's foundation. There are optics here." That last word made something cold settle in Jack's stomach. "What does where I sleep have to do with how I read applications?" he asked. "Nothing and everything," Nate said. "You are on her mind. You are in her space. That affects decisions whether you mean it to or not." Jack had to unclench his jaw before he spoke. "I did not ask to move in," he said. "Lily was sick. Claire made a choice." "I know that," Nate said. "Claire knows that. The board does not. The donors do not. They see a widow and a man with a story, and they start filling in blanks." He sat back, eyes on Jack. "I am not accusing you of anything," Nate said. "I am asking you to be aware." The back of Jack's neck prickled. He nodded once. "I hear you," he said. Nate slid a smaller stack of applications across the table. "These are the ones you flagged this week," he said. "Let us go through them, together." They did. Nate questioned Jack's reasoning on some, nodded at others, set a few aside. By the time they were done, the stack was thinner. Jack could not help thinking of the voices on the other end of the phone tied to the folders now in the maybe pile. Back at his desk, he stared at the butterscotch jar. The wrappers caught the light in small flashes. He picked one up, turned it between his fingers, then set it down again. That night, dinner at the guest house was quieter. Lily chattered as usual, but Jack answered with shorter sentences. Claire noticed. Her eyes lingered on his face longer than usual. "Long day?" she asked when Lily left the table to dig in the cupboard for a missing marker. "You could say that," he said. She wiped a spot on the table that did not need wiping. "Nate mentioned numbers," she said. "He said he had a conversation with you." "That was fast," Jack said. "Do you guys have a direct line from the copier to this kitchen?" Claire folded the dish towel in her hands. "We talk," she said. "About the fund, about money, about the future, about me," he added, unable to keep the edge out of his voice. "Sometimes," she said frankly. "You work for the fund. You live here." "Temporarily," he said. Her eyes flickered. "I told him I trust your judgment," she said. "That is why you are there." "And he told you I am approving too many cases," Jack said. "Right. He told me we need to watch the burn rate," she replied. "He has a point. We cannot help anyone if the fund runs dry." Jack pushed his plate away, appetite gone. "You do not have to defend him," he said. "He is protecting something important. I get it." "Jack," she said, "this is not about us." "Feels like it," he muttered. Lily returned oblivious to the shift, and the conversation drifted to her new art project. Jack forced himself back into the rhythm, but the earlier words sat between him and Claire like an invisible object they kept stepping around. The next day at the office, the strain tightened. Nate watched him more often. Not obviously, but enough that Jack felt the weight of those glances. When Jack walked to the copier, he caught snippets of conversations. "Claire is really investing in this one," someone murmured. "He has a great story." "Story," another voice replied. At lunch, Jack sat alone at his desk, instead of joining the others in the break room. The sandwich in his hand tasted dry. He thought about leaving the job. The thought startled him, but it was there all the same. He had just begun to feel like he was doing something that mattered. He did not want to become a problem to be solved. Later that afternoon, as the rain intensified, the office door opened, and Claire stepped in. She shook droplets from her umbrella and greeted the staff. In her hand was a folder. She went straight to Nate's office. The glass walls did not block the view, only muffled the sound. Jack could see them talking, their faces animated. Claire gestured with the folder. Nate listened, responded, his expression tight. At one point, both of them looked in Jack's direction. The feeling of being the subject and not the participant made his skin crawl. He pretended to review a form. After a few minutes, Claire left Nate's office and crossed to Jack's desk. "You all right?" she asked. "Fine," he said. I came to drop off some board summaries," she said, "and to see how you are doing. You have been quiet." "Quiet is good for this job," he replied. She tilted her head, studying him. "If Nate is hard on you, it is because he is hard on everyone," she said. "He does not like change. He barely tolerated Daniel when he first started this fund." "I do not want to be the reason you and your brother-in-law fight," Jack said. "We have been fighting about things since he was tall enough to reach my front door," she said. "You are not that powerful." He almost smiled at that. Almost. When he went home that evening, the guest house felt different. Not colder, just less solid under his feet, as if the floor might shift if he did not step carefully. He tucked Lily into bed, listened to her recount her day, watched her fall asleep mid-sentence. He turned off the lamp and left the door cracked. In the living room, he sat on the sofa with his elbows on his knees and his hands clasped. The fire in the gas insert washed the room in warm light, but he felt no comfort in it. He thought of the apartment, the towels over the windows, the silent radiator. He thought of the way Lily had coughed there, and his own panic. He thought of calling Claire, of the relief when she had said, "I am coming." He thought of the look on Nate's face in the meeting room, the way he had said, "You live in my sister-in-law's guest house," as if it was a problem to be managed. The longer he sat, the more those words dug in. He did not belong here. The thought came like a cold gust, simple, blunt. This was not his house, not his swing, not his guest house. He was a guest who had stayed past politeness, a weight tipping a balance he could not see. At some point in the night, he lay down, but sleep did not stick. He drifted in and out, waking with a start whenever the fire's hum changed, or Lily coughed once in her room. By the time gray light touched the edges of the blinds, he had made up his mind. He would leave. He got up quietly, careful not to kick the coffee table. In the bedroom, Lily still slept, hair fanned over her pillow, thumb tucked near her mouth. He pulled the duffel bag from the closet and laid it on the floor. The sound of the zipper seemed loud in the hushed room. He folded clothes with quick, efficient movements. Shirts, jeans, socks, Lily's favorite hoodie, her sketchbook. He tucked the stuffed fox carefully on top. He hoped she would forgive him for waking her early. He told himself he was doing this for her to avoid more tension, more whispered conversations that would eventually reach her ears. When he zipped the bag, the sound made Lily stir. "Dad," she mumbled, blinking. "Hey," he said softly. "We are going to go on a little trip." She pushed herself up on her elbows. "Where?" "We cannot stay here forever," he said, keeping his tone light. "We have been very lucky. It is time to move on." Her face crumpled. "But I like it here," she said. "I like the swing, and Miss Claire, and the way the house smells like cookies even when there are no cookies." "I know," he said. The words scraped his throat on the way out. "We were just visiting, remember?" "Where are we going?" she asked. He did not have an answer, not one that would reassure her. "We will figure it out," he said. "Pack your backpack, just the important things." She moved slowly, shoulders slumped, and stuffed a few items into her small bag. A shirt, a pair of leggings, a handful of crayons. She clutched the stuffed fox to her chest. In the kitchen, Jack found a notepad near the phone. He tore off a sheet and picked up a pen. He stared at the blank space for a long moment. Then he wrote in his careful, uneven handwriting, "Claire, thank you for everything. I do not want you to feel caught in the middle because of us. You have already done more than enough, Jack." He set the note on the table where she would see it. His eyes landed on the drawing Lily had given her days before, the one now held to the fridge by a magnet. 3 figures under a sun in front of a house with the swing beside them. For a second, he considered taking it down. It belonged to Lily. It was in a way a piece of her heart on the wall of someone else's kitchen. He left it where it was. Outside, the morning was damp and gray. The swing moved slightly in the light wind, almost as if it were watching them. Jack hoisted the duffel over his shoulder and took Lily's hand. Her fingers felt small and tense in his. They walked along the stone path to the gate. The porch light over the guest house door was still on its bulb, glowing white in the dimness. He did not look back at it. The street beyond the gate was quiet. A few cars passed, tires whispering on wet pavement. A bus stop sat half a block away, a metal bench under a scratched plexiglass shelter. They walked there in silence. At the bench, Jack set the duffel down and sat. Lily climbed up beside him and leaned against his arm. Her backpack straps dug into her small shoulders. "Are you mad at Miss Claire?" she asked. "No," he said. "I am grateful to her." "Is she mad at you?" Lily asked. He thought of Nate's words of the Board of Optics and stories. He thought of Claire's face when she had defended him. "I do not know," he said honestly. Lily sniffled. She tucked her face against his jacket. He wrapped an arm around her and held on. A cold mist clung to the air. Cars passed. Somewhere a dog barked. The bus did not appear right away. That was fine. Jack was not in a hurry to climb onto something that would carry them out of the one place that had felt solid in a long time, even if that was what he had decided they needed to do. He watched the road the way the hills sloped down toward the city. His breath made small clouds in the chilly air. He tried not to think about the look that would cross Claire's face when she found the guest house empty and the note on the table. He had chosen this. It was the only way he could think of to step out of the line between her and her family, between her and the shadows of what people thought she should be. Beside him, Lily's shoulders trembled once then again. He held her tighter, feeling every shiver. Claire went to the guest house with a mug of coffee, cradled in her hands, and a half-formed idea about bringing muffins later. The grass was still damp from the night, the air cool enough to make her cheeks sting. The porch light above the door was off. She had flipped it before bed. She knocked once lightly, the way she always did. No answer. She frowned and tried again a little louder. Still nothing. The curtains were drawn, but a thin line of light showed at the edge of one window. Someone had forgotten to close them completely. She shifted the mug to her left hand and tried the door. It was unlocked. A small current of unease moved through her. "Jack," she called, stepping inside. "Lily." The silence that met her felt wrong. It was too complete. No cartoon voices from a television, no clatter in the kitchen, no scratch of pencil on paper. The bed in the small bedroom was made. Not in the haphazard way of a hurried morning, but smooth pillows, arranged blankets tucked. The closet door was ajar. Inside, hangers swung slightly empty. The duffel was gone. In the living room, the sofa cushions were neat, the throw blanket folded. On the kitchen counter, the mug she had told Jack to feel free to use sat rinsed and upside down on a towel. On the table near the spot where Lily usually sat, lay a folded piece of paper. Claire set her own mug down hard enough that a little coffee sloshed over the rim. She wiped her hand on her jeans and picked up the note. The handwriting was careful, almost formal. "Claire, thank you for everything. I do not want you to feel caught in the middle because of us. You have already done more than enough, Jack." Her fingers tightened around the paper. For a moment, she simply stood there, hearing the blood rush in her ears, hearing the faint tick of the heater, and nothing else. She looked around again as if she might have missed them in some corner. Shoes by the door were gone. Lily's backpack was nowhere in sight. The stuffed fox that had occupied the pillow every night was missing. In the bedroom on the crate that served as a nightstand sat a glass of water with a ring at the bottom and the empty antibiotic bottle. Beside it lay a drawing Lily had been working on the day before. 3 figures, a house, the swing. This time there were small squares in the house's windows like lights. Claire swallowed. The guest house that had felt newly alive now looked as hollow as it had months ago. She turned and walked out, almost forgetting her own mug on the counter. The path to the main house felt longer than usual. She moved quickly, breathing faster, the cool air sharp in her lungs. Inside, she grabbed her keys from the bowl by the door, barely pausing to shove her feet into shoes. Her hand shook as she unlocked the car. The engine caught with a growl. She backed out of the driveway too fast, gravel crunching under the tires, and swung onto the quiet street. Where would he go? She tried to think like Jack, like someone carrying a duffel and a child and a weight of pride. He had no job to return to, no other relatives nearby. The apartment with its broken radiator and thin walls was the last place she wanted to imagine Lily going back to, but it was the only address she knew had been his before. She drove toward the old neighborhood, first hands clenched around the wheel. The city passed in a blur. Traffic lights changed. She barely registered them. When she reached the apartment building, the towels were gone from the windows. Someone else had taped a brightly colored sheet of paper on the front door. The landlord's car sat in the lot. There was no sign of Jack's truck. She pulled in anyway, scanned the parking spaces, checked the street. Nothing. Her chest tightened. She sat for a moment with the engine running, one hand pressed to her sternum as if she could calm her heartbeat by force. Rain began a light patter on the windshield. Think. If you left a place with no car, where would you go? To a station. To a stop. To a place where buses came that did not require more money than a couple of crumpled bills. The nearest bus line ran along the main road at the bottom of the hill, near her house, close enough for someone to walk with a child. She put the car back in gear and swung out of the lot, cutting through side streets to avoid the clogged arterial. Tires hissed on wet pavement. The wipers beat a steady rhythm. As she came up on the stretch that led past her neighborhood, her eyes scanned the sidewalk. searching for a small figure with a backpack, for a familiar duffel slung over a shoulder. The bus stop came into view ahead. A metal bench sat under a shelter that streaked with old posters. A trash can slouched nearby. The road beside it shone with reflected sky. On the bench a man sat with a girl tucked under his arm. Jack, Lily. Relief hit so hard it almost hurt. She signaled, pulled over, and braked a little too sharply. The car jolted. She did not care. She threw the gear into park and got out the door, clicking shut behind her. The air smelled of rain and exhaust. Her shoes splashed through a shallow puddle as she crossed to the sidewalk. Jack looked up at the sound. His face tightened when he recognized her. Lily's head lifted from his shoulder, eyes rimmed pink. Claire stopped a few feet away, breath coming fast. "Why did you leave?" she asked. The question came out more raw than she had intended. There was no polite buffer, no softened edges. Jack's jaw worked. He looked down at Lily, then back up at Claire. "We should not have stayed as long as we did," he said. "I am just fixing that." "By disappearing," she said. She held up the note, the paper damp at the corners from her grip. "By leaving this." He glanced at it, then away. "I did not want you caught between me and Nate," he said. "Between me and your board, and your donors, and whatever story people are telling themselves about us." Her shoulders tensed at Nate's name. "You decided that for me," she said. "It is not just about you," he replied. "It is about Lily. I can feel it. The way he looks at me. The way he talks about optics and perception. This is your world. I am just someone Daniel helped one night. I do not want to be the reason you fight with your family." Lily shifted on the bench, turning her face toward Claire. "I did not get to say goodbye," she said quietly. The words pierced. Claire took a slow breath. Cars flowed past on the road tires, sending up fine sprays of water. No one in them looked over. The three of them might have been standing in a bubble on the edge of the world. "I have been fighting with Nate longer than you have known him," Claire said. "He is not new to my life." "This is different," Jack said. "I hear what he is not saying when he talks about my job, about the guest house, about the fund." She could not deny that. She had heard it too. "You do not belong caught between the past and whatever this is," he added, gesturing vaguely between them. "You have your own grief to carry. You do not need mine on top of it." Her throat tightened. "Do you know what it has felt like since Daniel died?" she asked. "To walk into that house every day and hear nothing but the refrigerator and the tick of the clock?" He looked at her, eyes wary but listening. "It is not just quiet," she said. "It is empty. I would wake up and nobody would need me. There were days when the only time I spoke out loud was to order coffee." She glanced at Lily, then back at Jack. "Then you called," she said. "You were out of options. You needed help. And for the first time in a long time, I had somewhere to be that was not a boardroom or a lawyer's office. There was a child coughing in a cold apartment and a man who could not fix it alone." She took a step closer. Rain beaded on her hair on the shoulders of her coat. "You talk about not wanting to be a burden," she said. "You keep acting like we are doing you some huge favor by letting you stay, by giving you work. Did it occur to you that you are doing something for me, too?" Jack opened his mouth, then closed it. His fingers flexed on Lily's shoulder. "I am afraid," he admitted after a moment. The words came low. "I am afraid I'm going to mess this up, that I am going to let you down, that I am going to stand in a house that is not mine and wake up one day to find out it was a mistake I should have never walked into." "We are all afraid," Claire said. "You think I am not terrified every time I sign my name on a check in Daniel's name? You think I do not hear his voice in my head when I approve a grant or say no to someone?" She shook her head. "This is not about replacing him," she said. "Nothing and no one can. That is not what this is." Lily slid off the bench and marched the few steps to Claire. Her boots squeaked on the wet pavement. "Please do not make us go away," she said. Her voice wobbled, but she kept her chin up. "I like it when your house smells like soup, and when you laugh. You do not laugh a lot, but when you do, it sounds like you forgot you could." Claire crouched without thinking, bringing herself level with Lily. The child was still thin from the illness, but her eyes were bright, fixed on Claire with a seriousness that made her look older. Claire felt something crack inside a thin shell she had not even realized she had built. "I do not want you to go away," she said. It felt like the truest thing she had said in months. She pulled Lily into a hug. The girl's small arms wrapped tight around her neck, trust and desperation, and something like hope, all in that clinging hold. Over Lily's shoulder she met Jack's eyes. "I cannot promise it will be simple," she said. "Nate will have opinions. The board will have opinions. People always do." He stood slowly, the duffel at his feet. I do not want to put you in the middle, he said again, but there was less conviction in it now. You are not putting me anywhere, Claire replied. I am standing where I am choosing to stand. The bus appeared in the distance, a small shape growing larger, its lights cutting through the drizzle as it approached. The engine's rumble reached them a second later. Claire did not look at it. She kept her eyes on Jack. You once told me Daniel saved your life, she said. That one night made everything after possible. Let me do this. Let me keep saying yes to that decision. He looked past her at the road. The bus drew closer, hissed as it slowed. The driver glanced out, assessing the stop. Lily pulled back from Claire and grabbed her father's hand with one of hers, Claire's with the other. She stood between them, their hands linked like the drawings she kept making without thinking. The bus doors wheezed open. The driver waited a few seconds, saw that no one moved, and closed them again. The bus pulled away, leaving a wash of wet air in its wake. Jack watched it go. He took a breath, long and unsteady. Okay, he said. We will come back. The words felt fragile and heavy at once. Claire nodded. Relief, sharp and sudden, made her a little lightheaded. Good, she said, because I am not finished arguing with you. A corner of his mouth lifted. It was not exactly a smile, but it leaned in that direction. He picked up the duffel, slung it over his shoulder, and stepped off the curb. Lily walked between them, still holding both their hands as they crossed to the car. Claire unlocked the doors. Lily climbed into the back seat without needing prompting, buckling herself in. Jack slid into the passenger seat. Water from his jacket darkened the fabric. Claire started the engine. The vents blew cool air at first, then began to warm. She pulled away from the curb. The bus stopped receding in the rear-view mirror. The hill ahead rose toward the place that had for a while felt like a house waiting to remember how to be a home. The rain had eased to a thin mist by the time they reached the top of the hill near the cemetery. Claire did not drive straight to the house. Instead, she turned at the familiar stone wall and followed the narrow road that wound between rows of bare trees. Her hands stayed steady on the wheel. Jack glanced at her, then at Lily in the rearview mirror. Lily watched the world slide past, tracing a finger through the fog on her window. When the gates of Greenwood opened in front of them, iron dark against the gray sky, Jack understood where she was going. They parked near the same gravel path where he had stood weeks earlier, with a bouquet in his hands and a knot in his throat. Today he held nothing. His palms felt oddly empty. The three of them walked together up the hill. Wet leaves clung to the soles of their shoes. The air smelled of damp stone and cut grass. Somewhere a crow called, once then fell silent. Daniel Whitmore's grave stood in its place, the stone, cleanly engraved letters sharp. The chrysanthemums Jack had brought the first day were gone now, replaced by a new arrangement Claire must have laid in the days since. White lilies, green stems beaded with water. Claire stepped forward. She rested her fingers lightly on the top edge of the stone. I have been holding on to you so tightly, she said quietly, so afraid that if I let go even a little, you would disappear. Her voice did not waver, but there was a roughness at the edges. The mist settled on her hair, on the wool of her coat. I thought if the house stayed the same, if the routine stayed the same, I could keep you there, she went on, in the chair by the window, on the swing, in the space on your side of the bed. She drew a slow breath. But you were always moving, she said. You sat down on cold steps outside diners, and in plastic chairs, in waiting rooms, and on curbs next to people the rest of the world walked past. She turned her head slightly, looking back at Jack and Lily. They stood a few steps away, giving her space, but close enough to hear. You saved them once, she said, speaking to the stone as much as to the air. Now I get to. Jack swallowed. The words landed in him not heavy, but with a kind of quiet force. Claire knelt and adjusted one of the lilies that had tilted in the wind. Her fingers lingered on the stem. I am not replacing you, she said. I am not trying to fill your space. I am just opening mine like you asked me to. She had not told Jack about the letter yet, the one she had found tucked in the back of a drawer in Daniel's desk. The pages on which he had written in his careful script that love was not meant to be sealed away, that grief was real but should not become a wall. She would, she thought, but not here. Here she wanted her words to be hers alone. Lily stepped forward. The grass soaked her shoes, but she did not seem to notice. She reached out and laid her small hand next to Claire's on the stone. Thank you for helping my dad, she said. When I was little. Her voice was very clear. I wish I could have drawn you a picture, she added after a beat. I draw good swings now. Claire smiled even as her eyes shone. Jack moved closer, hands in his pockets, head bowed a little. He did not speak out loud, but in his chest something unclenched. He thought of the man on the diner steps. The envelope, the candy. The way he had said kindness did not need a reason. Behind them, tires crunched on gravel. A car door shut. Footsteps approached, careful on the damp path. Claire rose and turned. Nate stood a few yards away, his coat buttoned, his hair damp at the temples. He had no umbrella, only a folded piece of paper in his hand that he tucked into his pocket when he realized he was holding it too tightly. "I figured I would find you here," he said. Claire wiped a stray drop from her cheek that might have been rain, might have been something else. "You got my message," she said. "3 of them," Nate replied. His gaze moved to Jack, then to Lily, then back to the grave. He stood at the edge of the small group as if unsure whether he was welcome. Lily lifted a hand in a small wave. He returned it, awkward but sincere. For a moment no one spoke. The sound of the city reached them faintly from beyond the hill, a soft hum under the quiet. Nate cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology," he said, looking at Jack. "What I said to you at the office, about you taking Daniel's place." Jack blinked. He had not expected the words to come out so plainly. "It is not completely wrong," Jack said. "I am in his house. I am at his desk. I am in pictures with his wife and his niece." "Lily is not my niece," Nate corrected automatically, then looked at the girl. "Yet." The word hung there, small and startling. Lily tilted her head, thoughtful. Nate rubbed a hand over his face. "When Daniel started this fund, he said, I thought he was crazy, taking his own money and pouring it into strangers. I told him he was going to be taken advantage of. He told me that if even one person got back on their feet, it would be worth 10 who did not." He looked at the headstone at his brother's name. "I forgot that part," he said. "I got stuck on the numbers." He shifted his gaze back to Jack. "Seeing you in the office in the guest house, I saw a story I did not trust," he said. "A man with good timing and a sad past. I let that story color everything. That was on me." Jack stood very still. The words sank in slowly. "I did not come looking for any of this," he said, "but I also did not say no." "I know," Nate replied, "which is what Daniel would have done, said yes to the moment." He let out a breath. "If Claire is okay with this," he said, "if she feels steadier with you and Lily here than without you, then I am not going to stand in the way. I am going to try to be the brother he would recognize, not the one who hides behind balance sheets." Claire stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. For a second he stood stiff, then he hugged her back, eyes closing briefly. "Thank you," she said. He nodded against her shoulder. When he stepped back, there was moisture on his lashes that had nothing to do with the mist. He turned to Lily. "How is your breathing?" he asked. "Better," she said. "I do not make rattle sounds anymore." "Good," he said. "That would be a terrible nickname." She giggled. They left the cemetery together. Nate walked with them to the parking area, then headed for his own car when they split toward different exits. In the weeks that followed, their lives settled into a pattern that felt less like balancing on a ledge, and more like walking a path they were building as they went. Jack and Nate learned to work together at the fund. They disagreed sometimes sharply about applications, about risk, about where the line between help and enabling lay. They argued, but the arguments no longer had the same edge. They were about best uses of money, not about whether Jack belonged at the table. Lily went back to school fully. She brought home permission slips and spelling tests and flyers for family nights. Most of the time, both Jack and Claire showed up to those events. Sometimes Nate came too, standing in the back, hands in his pockets, pretending he was only there for the bake sale. Meals at the guest house or the main house became the norm, not the exception. They ate together most evenings, the conversations tumbling over one another in a way that filled the rooms with sound. There were still quiet moments, nights when Claire woke and reached for a side of the bed that stayed empty. Days when Jack stared at a stack of bills from the past and felt his stomach knot. Grief did not leave, and neither did fear. They simply moved over a little to make room for other things. One Saturday morning, 3 months after the day at the bus stop, the house smelled like coffee and toast. Light spilled through the windows in broad strokes. In the kitchen of the main house, the refrigerator door was open, humming. On the wall next to it hung a framed drawing. Claire had had it mounted a week before. She had taken the paper quietly from the spot on the fridge where it had curled at the edges and brought it to a shop downtown. Now it sat behind glass edges, smooth colors, a little brighter. 3 figures' hands linked under a big yellow sun. Behind them, the outline of a house with a porch. Beside it, the swing under the tree. From the small square next to the drawing in Lily's careful, uneven handwriting came the caption. "We did not replace anyone. We became a family." Every morning Claire paused in front of it with her coffee. Some days she just looked. Some days her fingers brushed the frame. Outside, the swing moved gently when the wind caught it. The chains no longer squeaked. The porch light over the guest house clicked on at dusk and shut off at dawn, cycling without anyone having to remember the switch. Inside, Lily's laughter ran down the hallway. Jack's voice followed, half pretending to scold about shoes left in the middle of the floor. Nate knocked at the back door with a file under his arm and a pastry bag in his hand, invited and expected. The house did not feel like it used to. It did not feel like something new either. It was simply full of footsteps and voices and the quiet, ordinary sounds of people who had chosen to stay. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.